Batman was my favourite superhero when I was a kid, and I grew up with the Michael Keaton films, which I think really nailed the darker, more serious tone and dramatic Gotham aesthetic. The Joel Schumacher films may have been in the same continuity, but they were really bad and brought back the horrendous campiness of the 1960s TV show. It wasn't until the Christopher Nolan trilogy that we finally got Batman depicted on film in a way that truly did the concept of the Dark Knight justice, with a really grounded and believable take on the Batman world and the origin and portrayal of the character. And I thought 2012's The Dark Knight Rises was an ideal film to park the character, at least on film, for a good few years before an inevitable reboot of this iconic superhero at some point down the line. But DC had other plans, and their DCEU was being developed to compete with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and unlike Nolan's gritty, practical, and relatively realistic Batman interpretation, this new DCEU would be a world of the supernatural and fantastical, beginning with 2013's Man of Steel, which was obviously the first appearance of Henry Cavill as Superman, leading to the introduction of an entirely new Bruce Wayne, Batman, in the 2016 Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice film. This new Batman, played by Ben Affleck, also appeared in both versions of Justice League and is due to continue to appear in DCEU films. However, I have to admit that I was very skeptical of the casting of Ben Affleck when it was first announced that he was going to play the Caped Crusader. Like many people, I was thinking, really? Ben Affleck as Batman? Of all the people they could have considered. But in the end, it turned out I was very wrong, because I was pleasantly surprised. Affleck did a very good job, bringing some real maturity, gravitas, and depth to the role, embodying an older Bruce Wayne and a more jaded, rugged Batman coming to the end of his crime-fighting career. There was also the real sense that this Batman was very up against it and quite vulnerable, given the additional challenge of having to fight against supernaturally powerful bad guys and to fight alongside Superman, Aquaman, Cyborg, The Flash, and Wonder Woman, people with actual superpowers, while Bruce Wayne is ultimately just a mortal man. I mean, the guy is literally facing off against aliens, not something we ever saw in the Christopher Nolan films. So he had to compensate through the use of his technologies and heavy weaponry. For this reason, I didn't really feel that this iteration of Batman was really best served in a world of magic and superpowers.
What are your superpowers again? I'm rich.
He was perhaps at his best in Batman vs Superman. Obviously, the film is most remembered for the epic showdown between the two title characters, in which Batman must make use of kryptonite in order to subdue Superman. And it's here that you can really see the difference between the two of them. What makes this version of Batman so much more relatable and compelling is his human vulnerability, and the fact that because he's up against seemingly invincible opponents, he has to work so much harder and be so much smarter, more skilled, resourceful, industrious in order to fight them successfully. In short, he has to be braver.
You're not brave. Men are brave.
Batman ultimately wins the fight, stopping short of killing Superman in the end, of course. But what's noticeable is once Superman's superpowers are negated by the kryptonite, and the playing field is leveled, Superman hasn't got a chance against Batman. Bruce Wayne is a much more competent fighter in hand-to-hand combat. Clearly he has the edge over Clark Kent. In fact, the Man of Steel only gets the upper hand in the fight in the moments when his powers temporarily return. But once Batman slaps the green whammy back on him again, Krypton's last son hasn't got a hope. In short, Superman didn't have to develop his fighting skills because he could just rely on his incredible physical strength. But take that away, and he's just a guy. And what's more, it's clear Batman was hungrier in this fight. He wanted to beat Superman much more. It meant more to him. It's a real David versus Goliath story, and you can't help but root for Batman. And that's something I really appreciated about this version of Batman. The guy is a brawler. Take, for example, the phenomenal fight scene in the warehouse later on in the film. It's a real showcase of what this Batman can do. Unlike the Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale Batman, Zack Snyder's BatFleck version is much more brutal and hardcore. He's merciless as he doles out the punishment in this scene, and this is one of the reasons I would have liked to have seen this version of Batman in his own standalone film series. When I look at all of the prominent characters that DC has in film right now, including Shazam, Black Adam, Superman, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, only Affleck's Bruce Wayne Batman has the strength to actually lead the franchise, which is why I think it's very unfortunate that there hasn't been quite as much structure and planning at Warner Brothers when it comes to really trying to create a genuine answer to Marvel's cinematic universe. Certainly we've seen what has happened to the MCU once the primary stars were retired. It's lost focus and become diffused and lacking in direction. But there's a real opportunity to galvanize the DCEU into a really strong franchise of its own, and Affleck's Batman is, in my opinion, a strong central character to build it around. At the moment, the DC universe on film and television is a bit confusing, with way too many Batmen in the mix. A little more streamlining is in order, because I see great potential here. But I think, most importantly, the franchise needs a director and writer with a very clear vision to lead it. I believe that person is Zack Snyder. Now, that's controversial to some people because not everyone likes the Snyderverse vision of the DC world. Batman vs. Superman, for example, is not everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people were disappointed that the long-awaited teaming up of the Man of Steel and the Dark Knight felt like a bit of an anticlimax. But I actually really like that movie, and it's grown on me a lot over the years. I love the tone of it, I love the intensity of it. I know it's a flawed movie, but the Ultimate Edition of Batman vs. Superman is just fantastic. It's really epic. It feels like a really big theatrical movie. And the Ultimate Edition is so much better than what we ended up getting in the theatrical release, because it gives you way more context and character background and puts back some very important scenes and dialogue that helps to explain a lot more about what's going on. And I think it goes without saying that the Snyder cut of Justice League is a far superior movie than the Whedon version that we got. Despite the Snyder edition being just ridiculously long at over 4 hours, nevertheless, I think even if you're not a fan of Zack Snyder's way of doing things, you cannot deny that the world he was attempting to create at least has a real sense of depth and identity all of its own. It's undeniably very different to the MCU. In fact, he makes the Marvel Cinematic Universe seem almost cartoonish by comparison. I would have liked if the studio had have indulged Snyder a bit more and allowed him to continue to produce DCEU/Justice League films, continuing the specific continuity he was building, because I think it really felt like the story arc he was working on was leading somewhere very interesting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.